Hello, everyone, to our 11th episode of Move for a Movement. I have with me today Peter DiMuro. He is the Executive Director of the Dance Complex in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Also is the founder and Executive Director of Public Displays of Motion, also in Cambridge, Boston, and has been in the field in theater, dance, including with the Liz Lerman Dance Exchange, for years upon years, has a lot of wonderful wisdom and experience to share. So thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be somewhere.
Of course, you're saying it's always fun to talk to people in 2020, even if it's over Zoom.
Right.
Yeah. So to start off, your company, Public Displays of Motion, often translates the humane within everyday into performance. So I'm curious about if you want to expound on a little bit why that's beneficial to you, why that's important, why that's even essential, right? Why that?
Sure. I think a lot of it stemmed even before my Liz Lerman days. Who, if people know that work, it's one of the first companies that was touring as it did with collaborative models. That we kind of grew away from. Someone standing at the head of a room teaching you all the movement, and then you did it badly or not or whatever. And but I remember like instinctively going to family, that my father was a cop, or the way they might sit, and this embodiment of subtle but very telltale movement, right, of spines, of gestural work, a tilt of a head. And I find it fascinating and beautiful in the way that, like, when I go to a play, I'm looking at the movement as much as I am even hearing all the words, in a straight play in that way. So, and then added like Liz's work on top of it, like the awareness that these are kind of like iconic gestures, and our idiosyncratic movement is the stuff of us. So why not include that in the range of movement? That if a développé or a port-de-bras starts with a gesture that is mine, that ends up in some kind of extended form, why not have the range of intimate and small to full-blown movement? I might say that some of my dances stay in that small range, and others of my dances, when we create together, I've just been working with a company in Newport, and just this idea of how to take the personal and make it expand in space makes a stamp of that artist on it, and that gets me excited, because then that, I think, comes through in the choreography, and then also in performance, as a viewer says, there's something unique about that arabesque that's not the same as every other one, that kind of thing. I think it's the basis of it. It's probably more to talk about, but that'll take 2 years to talk about.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's that magic of performance and dance, of that's not quite like anything else, and you can't quite put it into words. So that's my job as a critic, to put it into words. With the lighting and the flow of the costumes, and it's some kind of ephemeral magic, right? The rest of being cliche, of that happens in that moment that you can't quite put a finger on, but you feel the chill, like you have the goosebumps.
Yeah. You should do that. I think. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Definitely. So speaking of Liz Lerman, I was just thinking about, I feel like such an important part of her legacy that I see used a lot is for the collaborative process of breaking down work and audience engagement in the discussion. The exact name for it is on the tip of my tongue.
The critical response process. Yeah.
Yes. I know you've used it at the Dance Complex, but I see artists using that in talkbacks and other contexts, and it has that tie of that humane there, because in what you're talking about of bringing the humanity into performance, because you're directly engaging the community around, this is what the work is, what do you think?
Right.
In creating that conversation.
Yeah.
Which always just becomes such a powerful process and atmosphere that evolves from that.
It feels to me like it's the same thing that happens with performers if they're connecting to a gesture and understanding what they feel and what imagery or memory they're putting into that. The same thing happens for the audience. It's like, I think audiences are, I'm sure you've heard this, oh, I don't know how you do what you do because I don't know anything about dance. But then they'll go on and talk about everything they saw, and it's all wonderful and beautiful and certainly connected, to that. And so so the same thing by putting allowing an audience member to break down how they see something, and a gesture reminds them of their grandmother's earring or whatever. All of a sudden, then it makes it a personal experience as audiences. And in the arc of time that I've been making work, I've seen the elitism in dance. Oops, my phone, it's going off here. We are unrehearsed here. You're going to hear some office noises too, because I'm in the office. It's like, oh, there, that makes it human, and therefore differently than any other dance. And then I connect to the dance, and I'm not supposed to think anything. You're supposed to think what you think when you see a dance, and that's the hardest thing for some audience members to just allow themselves to do. We give permission by breaking down the kind of the mystique of it. To hell with mystique. Let's be transparent.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I tell this story a lot, but that reminds me of my father when I was visiting him down in Florida, and we're near Sarasota. He took me to see a performance in Sarasota, which was wonderful. I was very appreciative. And I asked him what he thought. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm like, no, 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 no.
Right.
You have eyes, you have a brain, you have a heart, you have a soul. What did you think? And the critical response process and processes like that, sort of breaking down this, like you're saying, the mystique or these messages we get since we're little of like what art is like this hallowed thing that's not for everyday people, that it requires this like unattainable virtuosity or whatever that message in that way is. Like, no, it's for you, it's for everyone, and it's essential to our lives.
Yeah, all the more reason we should, I have no science to back any of this up, I'm afraid, but just my intuition, in different parts of the country and in different eras, when we've had arts in the schools, for instance, and how it, the difference between STEM and STEAM, I'm pushing STEAM, let's get the A in there, the arts.
Yep.
And I think when you go to a place like North Carolina, for instance, where every grade school kid gets movement in their classes. And I remember visiting, teaching, and when I was a student at American Dance Festival and then teaching at ADF, it was like you'd see the progression after 8, 12 years of this. These kids were so embodied differently, and they weren't becoming dancers, but they became fluent in a nonverbal language, which allowed them to go see dance and enjoy the dance. And often, when I was first making dances, my still a good friend, my best friend David, a sign language interpreter, and so he would come to see my work because I wanted to interrupt the flow of dancer speak. Oh, that's a great, like triplets mean something to dancers, or they think they know. But he would see the movement as language in a different context from ASL or whatever. And so I love that part of it. And again, each thing is about just enabling the right to have an opinion about something, but it's connected to a real human feeling, in that way.
Yeah, I think there is some research about the ability of story in art to break down barriers.
Good.
Right. To like, this is my deeply held belief, but story is like this little backdoor in because it connects to that human element.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. You were speaking a little bit about qualities in work and things that you're interested in. And that's something that really intrigues me about your work, because you have, say, small visitations in a near empty room that's very atmospheric, and there's this sort of wrap of mystery around it. Yeah. And then significant others, dancers for friends, family, lovers, is more story based, like you're telling stories from your life and other narratives that are very clear as narratives. There's less sort of mystery in that way. So I'm curious about sort of things that you're interested in as a creator, as a choreographer. All those various, do you sort of different periods of your life are you interested in? Like, how does that work for you in your creative process?
Sure. Sometimes you forget why you do things, but as you're mentioning it again, I think in the beginning, just like it is as younger people, and we see it today happening with Black Lives Matter and issues of equity and everything, that people are like charged about something. And so in the beginning, it was the AIDS crisis for me, and I was making pretty, quote unquote, pretty dances like Mark Morris, although they weren't like Mark Morris at the same time. Music visualizations, and all that, and lovely. It's a lovely part of our genre, and that's great. But the work that stuck was the work that I was so impassioned about, and that was about bringing voice to people who were dying. This was my community, and like we see in the efforts today, there's revolt and there's protest, which was happening with ACT UP. And my version of that was to put it on stage and say, I'm going to give voice to these people who are dying. I'm going to give voice to my relationship with my parents and all that. So I remember distinctly being in the studio. I was 28 years old, and I said, I am not going to be silent in this one. This has to have a voice. And because I didn't want anybody to mistake it. And then you fast forward a few years, and different things become important. And also then the work with Liz, where her techniques were eye-opening to me, is that I could find a way to do what I was doing intuitively as an actor, dancer, and what little writing background I have. But how to translate that to other people connecting with their emotions, their memories. So I think in each pocket of time, I tried to say, well, what is this piece about? What does it need? Does it need to speak? Does it not need to speak? Does it need to be atmospheric? I love that term. It's not one I use. And then as time went on, I just felt like what's the commission? What do I need to commission myself to do that I haven't done? I haven't done anything to Mozart yet. Okay, let's do that. And if nobody was going to commission me to do it, I might as well commission myself, and have a good time, to keep upping the ante, And when I look at the times of great joy, it's when you pushed a new boundary and you've connected. In one piece, you've connected almost like a piece of musical theater without the musical theater part of it. You have dance that is atmospheric or metaphoric, and a spoken passage, and an aria is sung, and there's no movement. Well, why not? Let's just make it what it's supposed to be. Those times when I push the boundaries for myself have been the most creative. It's hard though, because then people don't know what to count on, and so like people can see an experiment that maybe it wasn't successful in terms of that piece. But I think overall, like, it keeps adding to it. And it's also hard to sell work. Like, if you're selling a piece, it's like, I tend to make work that it's not that it's not repeatable, but I have a certain kind of cache of dances that I do at the college level, for instance, that are repeatable, but I just find such joy in doing new, because I want to use the dancers collaboratively and for the process. So
Love it.
long answer. I've been doing this too long to have a short answer. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's wonderful. Interesting you said upping the ante, because I feel like some artists feel they get in this place of the plateau, right? They're like, where do I go next? This is what I'm interested in, and I've done it like 5 times. Like, how do I? And you're speaking about pushing those boundaries and pushing yourself, right. Commissioning yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really useful frame. Be successful, well, to sell, because we live in a society where that I feel like doesn't quite understand the arts ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. We don't get, the Spielbergs and Beyoncés and these like household names if we don't nurture it all the way down the pipeline.
Right. And we used to talk about, especially I would say modern dance in that era, but it's more like contemporary performance, was the research and development wing. Like, you look like somebody like Julie Taymor, who comes from this modern dance world, or even the Viewpoints work. Her name is escaping me right now. She's just passed away. Oh, I'm so sorry. Mary's somebody, and I'm not doing her service. I'm so sorry. But anyway, the methodology that we use is often used by the bigger names, and Beyonce was sampling a movement from Jack Cole, for God's sakes, and so that there's this that there's this idea that you're right, it doesn't look at the roots of it. And this is, and when we talk about equity, I mean, this is when we get into appropriation, for instance. Is it appropriation? Is it adoption with permission? How do you honor all those kinds of things? And you'd like to think that I'm on a kick for Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. If anybody knows them and sees this, they were raised, they went to school at Cambridge Ringe in Latin, and in my dream of dreams, they took they skateboarded here and they took a class at the dance complex, and they've made it big. So I'm just thinking they want to pay attention to their roots and donate a lot of money to us. So to honor that.
Yeah. I remember I was dancing in, I think it's the Cambridge some theater right down the road. I did a show there, and there was like a signed picture, and I was like, oh my God, they performed here. What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
See, that's
you
great.
never
That
know.
might be Central Square Theater.
Yeah, that's
great.
the name.
Yeah.
That's the name.
Yeah.
So one other aspect of your company that's really intriguing to me is the multi-generational nature. It's always something that stuck out to me watching your company. It's just the incredible span of generations.
Mhm.
So could you speak a little bit about what are the gifts of that? What are the challenges?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say there are a lot of gifts and probably fewer challenges.
Mhm.
The biggest challenge is just getting everybody together, in the same room.
Mhm.
Pre-COVID times, getting everybody the schedules to work. Although this is teaching us how to rehearse. We're working on stuff online a little bit. And I borrowed this from, Liz. Liz was kind of a pioneer. Like, I can't remember how old the Dance Exchange is right now, but at a certain
Mhm.
point, like in that 40-year history, she had older dancers who did school shows, and she loved them, but they were separate than the original company. And I was part of that first era when 5 new young dancers joined, and the actual older dancers, we were together, 10 of us as the core company. And it was, I think part of the reason it stuck with me was that it was newish for Liz to have these core people all the time. And I saw the benefits of, like, there's different information in a brain that is 80 years old. There's different information in their bones, how they went through the depression, like we're going through a pandemic, how it's just like, it's mind-boggling, the information. And when you get a varied group of intergenerational people together, old and young, black and white, straight and gay, to use the binal. I know we're more on spectrums these days, but this idea that you are really sourcing in collaborative ways the movement, but also the memories and the stories, and that help create that. And I'd say the same is true as it can be from our company here, PDM. We don't have the luxury of working 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, as we did at the Dance Exchange in those days. So I've had to kind of with us make shortcuts to that, or the work may grow a little slower, or we plumbing new depths of what scores we're going to use, or what tools we're going to use to make the dances has changed some, because I've had to, because I only have them, depending on the day. Even at the Gardner, when we were in residence there, we had to work in pockets because of people's livelihoods were made in other places, and they were able to do these 6 hours a week total. So that doesn't really, I think all the benefits are the benefits. And unison is hard for, unison is hard for me as a choreographic tool with the same age dancers, because I get bored easily. And can't we think of another way to end a dance that's not unison, they can't do the same thing, right? So when you have a group of very, very intergenerational people, and then also some have different backgrounds that, Michael's, a fine choreographer, fine mover, a lot of ballroom based. So his improvisations have, include that world. You have Anne Brown Allen, who, could have danced for Ailey and has, still has an extension, you want to praise. The putting of all that together, unison is sometimes age and sometimes background, but it's pushed me to search for ways to to have a different answer. There's a intentional unison is the term we were using for a while, because the intention of energy might be unison, but the bodies are doing different things. And you see this, why I love working with bodies that might be different too, as well. Like Chris Lenzo, who joined us for the piece, the Revelations in a tiny room. I can't remember the whole title of my own work, but and the man lost his legs when he was 19 years old, and all of a sudden, dancing it just takes on a whole different meaning when you're pairing him in his chair or him in the floor with another dancer. It's breathtaking, not because you feel sorry for him, because that's part of, we hear that, oh, they're old, that's so sweet that they're dancing. And I want to say, F you, it's not sweet. They're trained people. And same with Chris. It's like the man can bench press, a dancer over his head. And it's not about feeling sorry. That's about innovation and using kind of a parameter to excel in different ways. And isn't that what art should be, in some ways, so
Right.
I could go on.
Yes. And challenging the vision in our heads of what a dancer is and what they look like and what they do. Like bench pressing someone over your head when you're using a wheelchair, that is dance, that is movement, and it's challenging that paradigm.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I also love what you said, sourcing, right? That's a wonderful idea of like you were saying, in these people's bones and their marrow and just everything they've experienced. Yeah. And that being the fruit of a work as it shapes and comes together is a really beautiful idea.
Yeah, I love I work in narrative a lot, but then I work in non-narrative ways, and I think that's it's important for people to realize that just because you have story in something doesn't mean that if you sometimes I do the test, I'll take the words out, or if a song has words, I'll take all the music out and just start to look at movement. And then try to see, am I telling it's as if it were American Sign Language, where the syntax is different, right? You don't have a noun, a verb, a noun, and all those other terms that I can't remember right now, but you're putting them together in a different syntax. And so movement is the same way. And if it culminates in the same feeling, then that's successful. And why have words and movement be redundant of each other in that way? They should be kind of counterpoint. And that's what I think happens with pushing the paradigms around a little bit, is that you just it just keeps pushing an audience's experience of my work. If they see it a few times, then they start to understand what's going on, and then they learn to appreciate more deeply, as you do when you look at Martha Graham or Paul Taylor or others. You get to know it better.
And I think that's a really beautiful idea as well, of another way to tell a narrative, right? It doesn't just have to be with words, which is actually sort of a Western culture dominance thing.
Right. Exactly.
Our bodies can tell a story, and it's a challenge, I think, for dance as a field, because the culture isn't necessarily used to that, doesn't necessarily always have those skills, which, like, dance in public schools, please, thank you. And that there is that challenge of making it so it does translate, and so people get this, even if it's a subconscious awareness, like, wow, that was a story and there wasn't a word. That's when I think it really clicks, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it's the a little bit like when you watch America's Got Talent, which I really enjoy. I mean, I love seeing the technology of where a lot of the projections go these days, and it's like you're using mimetic movement sometimes to tell a story. It's when it gets into metaphor, what you might call atmospheric type thing, where there's something afoot, but you're not quite sure what it is. And I always equate it, especially when I'm working with a community, quickly, because they're all able and they're all wonderful to go to do the narrative more easily, because that's their normal syntax, right? But to go abstract, I just say it's like a dream. This is all our dream. And this is a bad dream, and it's the non sequiturs we're just living with because it's a dream or a nightmare or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, you're just creating a context, Like you're inside this dream of a snow globe, and this is what's happening. And people let go of the first this, then that thing, but they still get a story. And so I like to, and Liz was such a good teacher in this way. When people, and going back to audiences accepting things, if you accept this hand up like this as stop and this as come here, then you can be taught to accept other gestures as different things, right? And so it's just kind of like teaching people what they know, the process, and then kind of emboldening them to say, for instance, if it's a metaphorical kind of collage of a dreamscape piece like the piece we did at the Calderwood, I'll ask an audience member, name 3 feelings that you experienced during that thing, or we'll play the simile game. I used to say metaphor, but I was corrected by a 9-year-old that so I would say right in the middle of a performance Q&A type thing. It's as if ...
Right.
and so that it gets out of this emotional place, and so the audience member could say, it's as if Isabella Gardner is back living and putting things in her apartment, or it's as if I'm on a sea floating. So all of a sudden we get to a place where you're by simple encouragement, you're working with community members and making a piece, but also, and dancers sometimes, and then an audience is seeing it. I want to just say one thing about abstraction and postmodernism, if I can, because it's just struck me, and it's come up with in some, I don't want to say contentious conversations lately, but this idea of we talk about folkloric dances, and there's an older conversation about, is ballet a folk dance, and that comes up every now and then because you created a language and people understand it, and they come to accept it. Except a lot in the ballet world, and I'm not knocking it. It takes the dance out of the people, and then some people watch it and some people do it, right? So what is there about the work that we're doing that is equitable and does, and there's writing about this. I think Miguel Gutierrez has written about this idea of postmodernism and feeling like you have access to this. And I've often felt about my own upbringing as I thought we were middle class. We were poor, just to name it, working class. And this idea of abstraction was so hard for me because it felt like a luxury to think in those terms, and I was being encouraged as a grad student to think about concepts when I was just trying to tell the damn story, and so, and as I mentioned, like when people were dying of AIDS, it was important to be narrative in a certain way for me because that was going to tell the story. So I think of multiple cultures and their approaches to telling their ancient histories is literal to them. It's not abstract. It's real. And so if it comes away a movement that looks abstract to another eye, that's one thing. But I think this, I've just been toying with this whole thing about how do we think about the art that we make as equitable as well, and with permission, look to our to cultures that have created in what we might think of more narrative forms. I have a little East Indian dance Jerry Houlihan taught me at one point in my bones. How do we, with respect, understand that that's a whole system of tools that postmodernism might have thrown away, so why not use the tools that we all have in all the multiple ways as a human race we've told stories, so I've just been drawn at me, and it couldn't
no, that's wonderful. It's I think a really important discussion, a complex discussion that sounds like it's happening and it should happen, and let's keep pushing it.
Yeah, and I think it's on my mind a lot because of our work here at the Dance Complex. That's my other job, and we often it happens in the company too. We've had gigs where we've been asked to perform or make work at Villa Victoria, which is down in the South End here, and received money to do so, and with a welcome and open arms from the community there. But it's challenging for some artists to say, well, what are we doing here? We're not of these people. And so how do we collaborate outside our culture, and how do we do that respectfully? So, and I think that's changed over the last 10 years especially, in my first days with Liz Lerman, it was less of an issue for the context of those times. Would we do the same thing again now? Probably not. I remember one horrific moment where I was directing a scene in the Hallelujah series, and I stepped over this Buddhist priest who was rolling on the ground, and his choir, or the congregation in the audience, this is during rehearsal, gasped because you never step over a Buddhist priest. And I, of course, did not know that, not being Buddhist.
Right. Right.
But of course we're going to make faux pas. And it's just so interesting how the context of time does teach us to behave and be sensitive to what we're aware of, and we're probably insensitive of what we're not aware of in those ways. So at the complex, we look at like who gets to teach what, and is it your heritage? If you were born in Madrid and you're not a great teacher, does that mean you get to teach flamenco, or have you done the study and the work, and all those kinds of things come up. And so I think that we think about it a lot, and it does get complex because everybody is different.
Well, that answered my next question. I think I was going to ask about at the complex, the steps you're taking to decolonize, to make that really inclusive, accessible space for anyone who loves dance. And that's been my experience of that community, right? It's a really special thing when you can get to that place where it's just everybody loves dance, and it's everyone who does love dance.
It's certainly an ideal, and I know I feel like as long as there's a shift in who comes up those steps every day, it is a continuing piece of work, to do it. I feel like I was chatting with another choreographer about where you bring in more than one kind of thing, and we'll just keep it at dance. You bring, in the old days it was modern and ballet, and Liz has her stories about the hierarchies of all that. And in our building, we've got 7 different kinds of African from 7 different African countries. So there's difference and nuances that might look all the same to my white eye, So the moment we have all these cultures mixing together, and the shoulds and shouldn'ts, the rules of them all, it becomes complex and important to get to the core story and to have the core value of why we're here together. So we made a commitment last year to, of course, ongoing work. We had an awful period of time a couple summers ago when Dancing Queerly Festival was happening. That's not the bad part. That was good. Dancing Queerly was happening.
So much fun.
Dancing Out Boston was happening. There was a festival or two. A lot of folks from I think it was African Dance Festival, and we were mixing up in the building. But someone called out someone in the wrong bathroom, and there was an act against a woman of color in the building that was not appropriate, and we had to deal with not. I will own that we didn't do it in the most successful way. We were a little insensitive at the moment, but her safety was of concern. We had people with disabilities trying to get up a broken chairlift at the time. It was just craziness for like 1 6-week period. And not to say that the issues weren't before that, and didn't continue after that, but it was a signal that we really needed to spend some time. So we started a series of meetings with Crystal Brown, who helped facilitate the staff, and about our intentions around a community. And we started bringing those conversations more public 2 years ago. And then last year we said, we're going to commit the winter months, January, February, and March, to these open dialogues, and which we did this past year. And now we're really continuing in deep earnest and trying to figure out the right structure to, but we know that includes Zoom rooms, because people come to a Zoom room more readily than they did coming live, because their lives were all crazy. So now we're committing to this work, of course, and sadly we've had some furloughs that we've had to put out for some staff here, and but with that comes the idea of restructuring too. Is like, how do we with our income the way it is, the funding the way it is, how do we be nimble and create an administration that can support the multiple voices in the building and the multiple ways of creating and studying and performing. So I don't know the answer to it yet, but that's what the next winter months will be about to go deeper in. And we're starting, it's so long in coming, and I apologize to people already, to a blog that will include video and writing. So I guess it's a vlog blog about the culture of community here. And we've done some writing that we're going to be releasing in spades over the next few weeks. And anytime an issue comes up, I want to be transparent about it and just get online and say, hey, this question came up today. This is what we're dealing with. If you want to make a remark, make a comment or give us a call, that kind of thing. So at the same time, the train is running and we're trying to keep everything moving and pivot and have resilience and all those things too. So
I think the organization is doing a wonderful job with Starlight Square and these ways you have pivoted. Like, you need to make dance, right? People need to dance. People who dance need to dance.
Right,
People who create dance need to create dance.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, well, how do we continue to make that happen?
Right. Yeah. And even with that, there, I'd say 98% of the people are fine and happy and thrilled. And there's a few folks who have questions, and I'll just say this, that I feel like I don't mind even being called out if there's a confusion, because then at least the question comes out. I don't mind being called in. I love being called in the best, because then it feels like you're having a conversation. It's the lack of call, And so I think that's the other thing that I'm searching for, is how to encourage people to feel like they can call up or write and say, hey, I can't understand why you're doing this. Let me know what's going on. And then you have the conversation, because that's the only way that we're going to get through anything. And I just feel like this, we owe it to each other to do that. I see people my age, and I'm a man of a certain age that are entitled. Sometimes knowingly they feel this way, and sometimes unknowingly, and I am probably among them. But that's why we're in this period of reflection, and it just takes dialogue to find out what we need to do for each other. So.
Yeah, and you were talking about conversation, and I think that's really where it starts.
Yeah.
Because it starts with people being heard and someone saying something about their experience, and other people going, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And that is the start of change, some kind of change.
Right.
Not always, but
right. I when I took this job, it's confusing for some people. I think it's confusing for me sometimes. I'm a practicing artist, and I think that's what I bring to this job at the dance complex. And it's a way to go. The board didn't have to take me. Founders of organizations are usually artists in our world, and then they usually switch off to something else. And I'd seen that some imbalance in that happen. I'll be frank, with the Dance Exchange when I left. I just, as Liz was shifting off from founder to emeritus and all that, we weren't sure where it was going to go. And I just felt like any organization I want to be part of, I want to make sure that the artist has a voice, and that in this instance, that I'm the conduit for artists and voice, especially when the budget is, we're going to lose a couple $100,000, if not more, this year. Not lose, but it will come out of reserves, and we're going to have to fundraise for it. And you have to stay true to your mission about, we're enabling the creation, study, and performance of dance. And so that's my role. And at the same time, we have to be listening to voices. So you're balancing lots of things. My point with this was something, that I'm a practicing artist still, and that's confusing sometimes. Apparently I've confused myself. But I feel like if I don't have this practice of art and being reflective in a studio, and having what I think is the as equitable a process as there is in a studio that can be, it teaches me how to do that administratively. And again, I'm going to fail. We're all going to fail, but we have to fail so we can succeed. So it's just a quest right now to try to figure out more and more, as I try to figure out how we're going to with some great, the staff is staff both on furlough and the staff that's remaining are great. And everybody's been great to help us think as best we can. And just fingers crossed for just have that word resilience, creeps in.
Right. Lastly, tell us about Stones to Rainbows.
Sure.
So much fun.
Yeah. So very excited. I don't know when this will air, but we're going to show a little sneak peek on November 8th at a gala online. It'll be an hour or so, a little cocktail party that we're doing. Stones to Rainbow came out of just this kind of thing we're talking about, this conversation. And I've been in rehearsal with Michael Winward and Alex Davis, making a duet in honor of, it was commissioned for a man's memorial service. Rudy Kickel, who wrote for Bay Windows, was the editor. I wrote for him when I was writing. And the question came up, oh, you were you were there when the AIDS crisis started, basically, Grandpa, can you tell us the story? And I equated it to my father telling, would never talk about World War II or the war. And I realized, oh, there's just this generational difference of like having experienced this. It's like us now, like, your kids and your grandkids are going to talk about this time and the pandemic. What was it like,
Right.
Catherine? So, and then I started just like listening for in the spectrum world that is the queer world now, which we would have called gay in my youth. What's the information that I'm lacking as an older person that I need to know? What's the information that younger people are lacking because they don't know or haven't experienced yet? And it starts with this conversation. And so I imagined that we'd be in these rooms where we'd be like speed dating, not dating, but speed talking with each other and videotaping it and all that. And the basis of the conversations would become the content for the work. And so now that's all gone on Zoom. We've created Just a Queer Minute, where people can dictate a story on audio or video, or write it out. And now all this work will have a presence in an art installation that will be made. We think it's going to be made out of doors, closet doors and portals, just as, to be directly metaphoric to coming out of the closet with each other. But a great scenic designer who's taking on the major part of the designing, Jeffrey Peterson, is creating, he has a new idea. He just sent it and I haven't read the email yet, about how this thing could be almost like a spatially distanced carousel in a way of experience. People could go in and out, but they'd be hearing the sounds of these interviews that we've done. They might see a video projected onto it. They might see text from the History Project, or things donated. Our two big partners are History Project and Arlington Street Church, along with Agora Cultural Partners. So the thought is that you can walk safely in and amongst the installation to hear these generations, old and young, gay and straight, somewhere along the spectrum within fluidity of gender or whatever the term, and also then absorb that, and then that installation becomes the backdrop to a cabaret, which I'm using very lightly as the word. It'll be dance, it'll be spoken word, it'll be song, it'll be a soliloquy, a performance by queer artists of all ages in different sites. We hope around Massachusetts. I haven't thought about the country yet, but just Massachusetts is fine to think about right now. So we're looking forward to that, and then that installation will be created, keeping in process until June of 21, where we'll do some public sharing of it and also probably virtual sharing of it there too.
Love it. Sounds so exciting.
Fun. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Even within one community, through different generations, whatever divides, there are stories to be shared and understandings to be established.
Yeah, and I think this is with at least our modern, and I know that there, in especially indigenous peoples, there's a revere for the I forget the term of two feathers. There's some term that I'm going to screw up, so I won't go there. But there's this idea that people might have both sexes within them, or this idea of fluidity was revered as mystical and knowledgeable. But in our present day version of being gay, we stretch back to like people coming out more in the 40s, 50s and on. So we have like 100 years of this modern version of what it means to be gay to queer, and hence the title Stones to Rainbows, Gay to Queer Lives, so that we can just kind of understand that we've gone from like a binal and antagonistic thing from gay and straight, understanding that in the gay world, the spectrum is a more realistic version of who we are. And it's a more realistic version of what straight people are and humans are, and how we're going to deal with any problem, right? It's not about either or, it's about and that's the spectrum. So,
Not about either or, it's about and. That's lovely.
yeah, I got
Yeah.
it.
And yeah, the gender binary is a complete Western culture fabrication, I'll even call it. Like, cultures going way back from ancient India to all these different cultures had this idea of a sort of third gender or a fluid gender, something in between and not the binary.
Right, and it's a bias of thought, right? And as we're taught that we're now in our equity, diversity, and inclusion training, that's for that first step, that unknown bias that has crept into our lives. And so what an exciting time to make.
It's a confusing time, an exciting time,
Exactly,
a stressful
right.
time,
Exactly, yeah.
what is going to happen time. It's
Right.
everything.
Right. Right. Oh boy.
Yeah. So anything else you want to share about what you're doing, what your company's doing, the dance complex, anything else you want to share, please let us know. What can we follow, engage in, support?
Thank you. Well, I think, we kind of hit it before. I think it's kind of being in conversation with the complex, especially because I just feel like that's people, if people feel a barrier to anything, know that the want, even if it is perceived that there's a barrier or a closed door, that we're open. We're literally open Wednesday through Sunday, and we're just open to understanding, especially now, like to rebundle all the stuff that's been unbundled to bring it back together. And I feel the same way about making art. It's one of the most joyous things that I can do. I just learned to cook again during the pandemic, and making, like, it was so exciting that I could make something that was edible, after so many years on the road, so making is important to us and to all of us. And I think that's and making is also includes like making sense of things, or making logic, or making something out of chaos or disorder. We all seem to have a need for that. And so I like to think that our work at the complex does that, and my performance work does that. But maybe that's just a plea to seek those experiences out for oneself. And if if you want to come and have a cocktail on Zoom with us anytime, we'll probably start those up in the spring again. We'll do kind of our queer cocktail hour, and you don't need to be queer or identify that way to join us at all. But and also November 8th, this little thing that we're doing, that'll be, if it's past November 8th, you can probably find it online. It's called Sequence in My Sink, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We included the kitchen sink in this performance because it's all the stuff we're working on. So.
Love it. Well, thank you. So go right ahead.
One more. I'm sorry. There's one more project called Postcards from the Front that we're working on, and it is kind of something to put together for our company so they can make it home. So they're always all collaborators, but everybody's like done these amazing movement studies in their home or in their backyards, and we've arranged put out a call to frontline workers, and we use that term very loosely during the pandemic because it kept shifting, and postcards so that they would write to themselves and receive in 5 years for what they didn't want to forget about this time. And Lindsay Kettle-LaPointe is making, it's the first piece I think I've made intentionally for online solely. And so I'm very excited about that. And with that'll get debuted as well. And we'll be revealing a new postcard every month or so until the first anniversary in March. And it'll actually be a set of playing cards made from these pictures as we get closer to it, so that there's something tactile with that. So So just come to the website, sign up for our email, so you can follow that too. That'd be great.
Love it. Love it. We'll put all that info in social notes, etc.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Please go vote if you have not. Extremely important. We all know that. Preach to the choir. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks so much. Again.
Thanks for having me, Catherine. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Of course.